Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Patriots History. Hold on one second. Whenever I have a fan going, things get dicey around here. Reminder, I don't know when you're listening to this, but I'm recording this on June 19th. We have our Pilgrims to Patriots tour coming up July 31st through August 5th. That will be Plymouth, Salem, Lexington, Concord, afternoon at Fenway Park, Boston Harbor Cruise, everything's there. So make sure you check it out. We do have special offers if you're bringing several kids, so give us a call and let us know. All right. I may have to break this one up into two. Currently, we are stopping our reading of the text to read another document, and this is William Jennings Bryan's Cross of Gold speech, 1890, where he accepted the to the Democrat National Convention. So it's his first speech in defense of the Democrat Party platform. So this is in the Patriots History Reader. So as are all the other documents that we do. All right. On July 9th, 1896, 36-year-old William Jennings Bryan, a former congressman from Nebraska, delivered the final speech in defense of the Democrat Party platform at the party's national convention. It demanded a bimetallic standard with unlimited coinage of both silver and gold, whereas the Republican platform called for continuing adherence to the gold standard as the base for all U.S. economy. The bimetallic standard was to be the ratio of 16-1 in the value of silver to gold. The idea was to increase the money supply and inflate the currency to help the strapped and debt-ridden farmers and workers in Middle America. It was a populist primary economic measure in the 1896 election. All right, so just a refresher here. Historically, the United States has been on the gold standard. It was 15-1 in the early republic. By now it was 16-1, meaning it took 16 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold, or 16 silver dollars to buy one gold dollar. Except the problem was, or from the populist perspective, the opportunity was that silver started to come out of the ground in much faster, larger ratios than it previously had. By now, 1896, it was coming out of the ground at 17-1. That is, you dig up 17 ounces of silver before you dug up an ounce of gold. What the populists wanted to do was to force, by law, the government to buy all the silver, but to coin it at a ratio of 16-1. And you say, but it's coming out of the ground at 17-1. That's right. So if the populists had their way, they would force government to pay too much for silver. And every time you had an ounce, or let me put it this way, every time you had a gold dollar's worth of silver come out of the ground, which would be 17 silver dollars worth of silver, the government was going to buy 16 of those and call it a gold dollar, and left you with one additional silver dollar every single transaction. Now, somebody like you or me, that's not going to matter. Even some of your rich friends, it won't matter. But if you're an arbitrager, someone who makes their living on arbitrage or the margins of value in stocks, bonds, or coins, that is a huge deal, because now you're talking about millions of silver dollars, not a few thousand. And so as a result, you exchange that for millions of gold dollars, and in the end, you're going to end up with thousands and thousands, if not millions, of silver dollars left over that you can then go back and buy gold with. Long story short, it's a type of inflation. You're forcing government to inflate the currency by paying more for silver than it should, allowing more silver to circulate, which causes inflation. Now, as we went through in earlier chapters, and I don't want to go through it again, deflation was hurting the farmers because prices of all things were falling, meaning farm implements, farm goods, all that kind of stuff. But the price of the land was steady. Your mortgage payments were steady because you negotiated them back then for 10 to 15 years. So the prices of your cotton, your wheat, your sorghum, whatever it is you are growing and selling are falling, but your price of the mortgage stays the same, and farmers were getting behind. Thus, they thought inflation would be a way to handle this, just inflate the money supply and end deflation. That wasn't just hitting us, it was hitting the whole world. So that's the background to this. Although young and relatively inexperienced, Bryan had been lobbying extensively behind the scenes for presidential nomination. His speech, however, almost totally by itself catapulted Bryan to national prominence, and he was nominated the following day on the 5th ballot. Bryan electrified the delegates with his dramatic oratory, eloquence, possibly the most effective delivery style in American history, and the convention dissolved into a frenzy. The listeners tore off their coats and hats, flung them into the air, and screamed in ecstasy as if an old-fashioned religious revival. The phrase, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold," became the Democrats' slogan in the election. Bryan was defeated by William McKinley, and his speech became the final hurrah for the bimetallic standard and the free silver movement. It also marked the end of the populist movement, a generally lower-class Western and Southern agrarian revolt, and the rise of the new progressive movement with its upper-class elite urban influences. In Bryan's time, there was no radio or TV, so only Democrat stalwarts heard the original speech, and with only a few months to campaign, he was unable to dazzle enough voters to win. Bryan spoke to a specific issue and was heard by thousands. Style and content of political speeches has been changed radically by the media, but for its time, the Cross of Gold address was the epitome of political speech making. So here it is, William Jennings Bryan address to the Democratic National Convention. I would be presumptuous indeed to present myself against the distinguished gentleman to whom you've listened if this were but a measuring of ability. But this is not a contest among persons. The humblest citizen in all the land, when clad in the armor of righteous cause, is stronger than all the whole hosts of error they can bring. I come to speak to you in defense of a cause as holy as the cause of liberty, the cause of humanity. When this debate is concluded, a motion will be made to lay upon the table the resolution offered in commendation of the administration and also the resolution in condemnation of the administration. I'm sorry, in commendation of the administration, and then also in condemnation of the administration. Sorry. I shall object to bringing this question down to a level of persons. The individual is but an atom. He is born, he acts, he dies, but principles are eternal. And this has been a contest of principle. Never before in the history of the country has there been witnessed such a contest as that through which we have passed. Never before in the history of American politics has a great issue been fought out as this issue has been by the voters themselves. On the 4th of March, 1895, a few Democrats, most of them members of Congress, issued an address to the Democrats of the nation asserting that the money question was the paramount issue of the hour, asserting also the right of a majority of the Democratic Party to control the position of the party on this paramount issue, concluding with a request that all believers in free coinage of silver in the Democratic Party should organize and take charge and control of the policy of the Democratic Party. 3 months later, in Memphis, an organization was perfected, and the Silver Democrats went forth openly and boldly and courageously proclaiming their belief and declaring that if successful, they would crystallize in a platform the declaration which they had made. And then began the conflict with zeal approaching the zeal which inspired the Crusaders who followed Peter the Hermit. I think he was killed. One silver Democrat went forth from victory unto victory until they are assembled now, not to discuss, not to debate, but to interrupt the judgment rendered by the plain people of this country. But in this contest, brother has been arrayed against brother and father against son. The warmest ties of love and acquaintance and association have been disregarded. Old leaders have been cast aside, and they refuse to give expression to the sentiments of these whom they would lead. And new leaders have sprung up to give direction to this cause of freedom. Thus has the contest been waged, and we have assembled here under the binding and solemn instructions as were ever fastened upon the representatives of a people. We do not come as individuals. Why, as individuals, we might have been glad to compliment the gentleman from New York, Senator Hill, but we knew that people for whom we speak would never be willing to put him in a position where he could thwart the will of the Democratic Party. I say it was not a question of persons, it was a question of principle, and is not gladness, my friends, that we find ourselves brought into conflict with those who are now arrayed on the other side. The gentleman who just preceded me, Governor Russell, spoke of the old state of Massachusetts. Let me assure him that not one person in all the convention entertains the least hostility to the people of the state of Massachusetts. But we stand here representing people who are equals before the law, and the largest is the state of Massachusetts. When you come before us, before the law of the largest cities in the state of Massachusetts. When you come before us and tell us that we shall disturb your business interests, we reply that you have disturbed our business interests by your action. We say to you that you have made too limited in its application the definition of a businessman. The man who's employed for wages is as much a businessman as his employer. The attorney in a county town is as much a businessman as the corporation counsel in a great metropolis. The merchant at the crossroads store is as much a businessman as the merchant in New York. The farmer who goes forth in the morning and toils all day, begins in the spring and toils all summer, and by the application of brain and muscle to the natural resources of this country creates wealth, is as much a businessman as a man who gets upon the board of trade and bets upon the price of grain. The miners who go 1,000 feet into the earth or climb 2,000 feet upon cliffs and bring forth from their hiding places precious metals to be poured in the channels of trade are as much businessmen as the few financial magnates who, in a back room, control the money of the world. We come to speak for the broader class of businessmen. Ah, my friends, we say not one word against those who live upon the Atlantic coast, but those hardy pioneers who braved all the dangers of the wilderness, who have made the desert to blossom as the rose, those pioneers away out there rearing their children near to nature's heart, where they can mingle their voices with the voices of the birds, out there where they have erected schoolhouses for the education of their children, and churches where they praise their Creator, and cemeteries where deep in the ashes of their dead are the deserving of the consideration of this party as any people in the country. It is for these that we speak. We do not come as aggressors. Our war is not a war of conquest. We are fighting in defense of our homes, our families, and our posterity. We have petitioned, and our petitions have been scorned. We have entreated, and our entreaties have been disregarded. We have begged, and they have mocked when our calamity came. We beg no longer, we entreat no longer, we petition no more, we defy them. The gentleman from Wisconsin has said he fears a Robespierre. My friend, in this land of the free, you will need fear no tyrant who will spring up among the people. What we need is an Andrew Jackson to stand as Jackson stood against the encroachments of aggregated wealth, which, if you know from my lectures, is not the case. Jackson did not do that. He stood against aggregated wealth in the hands of the Whigs so that he could aggregate that wealth in the hands of Democrats. But I digress. They tell us that the platform was made to catch votes. We reply to them that changing conditions make new issues, that principles upon which rests democracy are as everlasting as the hills, but they must be applied to these new conditions as they arise. Conditions have arisen, and we are attempting to meet those conditions. They tell us that income tax ought not to be brought in here. That is not a new idea. They criticize us for our criticism of the Supreme Court of the United States. My friends, we have made no criticism. We have simply called attention to what you know. If you want criticisms, read the dissenting opinions of the court. That will give you criticisms. They say we passed an unconstitutional law. I deny it. The income tax was not unconstitutional when it was passed. It was not unconstitutional when it went before the Supreme Court for the first time. It did not become unconstitutional until one judge changed his mind. We cannot be expected to know when a judge will change his mind. It's quite unconstitutional. Constitution clearly says there shall be no direct tax. That's what an income tax is. Sorry there, Bill. You missed that one. The income tax is a just law. No, it's not. It simply intends to put the burdens of government justly upon the backs of the people. I am in favor of the income tax. When I find a man who is not willing to pay his share of the burden of government, which protects him, I find a man who is unworthy to enjoy the blessings of a government like ours. He says that we are opposing the national bank currency. It is true. If you will read what Thomas Benton, former senator from Missouri, said, you will find that he said that in searching history, he could find but one parallel to Andrew Jackson, and that was Cicero, who destroyed the conspiracies of Catiline and saved Rome. He did for Rome what Jackson did when he destroyed the bank conspiracy and saved America. No, Jackson destroyed the Bank of the United States, which all bankers, local little bankers, loved because it straightened out the commerce and trade of the United States by giving you a national clearinghouse, and it offered money that could be respected in all parts of the country. So Bryan is off. We say in our platform that we believe that the right to coin money and issue money is a function of government. We believe it. We believe it is part of the sovereignty and can no more with safety be delegated to private individuals than can the power to make penal statutes or levy laws for taxation. No, that's not true. The Constitution does not prohibit banks. If anything, the first Congress enabled the Bank of the United States. It does not say individuals may not coin money. It simply says that the U.S. government may coin money. Got to read your Constitution there, Bill. Mr. Jefferson, who was once regarded as a good democratic authority, seems to have a different opinion from the gentleman who has addressed us on the part of the minority. Those who are opposed to this proposition tell us that the issue of paper money is a function of the bank and that the government ought to go out of the banking business. I stand with Jefferson rather than with them and tell them, as he did, that the issue of money is a function of government and that banks should go out of the government governing business. Funny, I don't remember any of the founders complaining about private banks when Robert Morris was financing the American Revolution from his bank. They complained about the plank that declares against the life tenure in office. They've tried to strain it to mean what it does not mean. What we oppose is that plank in the life tenure that is being built up in Washington, which establishes an office-holding class and excludes from participation in the benefits the humblest members of our society. Supreme Court ruled in the 1990s that term limits are not constitutional. If you want to have term limits, you need to have a constitutional amendment. Let me call attention to 2 or 3 great things. The gentleman from New York says he will propose an amendment providing that this change in our law shall not affect contracts, which, according to the present laws, are made payable in gold. But if he means to say we cannot change our monetary system without protecting those who have loaned money before the change is made, I want to ask him where in law or in morals can he find the authority for not protecting debtors when the Act of 1873 was passed, when he now insists that we must protect the creditor. He says he also wants to amend this platform so as to provide that if we fail to maintain the parity within a year, that we will suspend the coinage of silver. Never happens. It's like the balanced budget. Never happens. We reply that when we advocate a thing which we believe will be successful and are not compelled to raise a doubt as to our own sincerity by trying to show that we will do if we are wrong. I ask him if he will apply logic to us, why does he not apply it to himself? He says he wants this country to try to secure an international agreement. Why doesn't he tell us what he is going to do if they fail to secure an international agreement? There is more reason for him to do that than for us to expect to fail to maintain the party. They have tried for 30 years to secure an international agreement, and those are waiting for it most patiently who don't want it at all. Now, my friends, let me come to the great paramount issue. If they ask us here why it is we say more on the money question than we say on the tariff question, I reply that if protection has slain its thousand, the gold standard has slain its tens of thousands. If they ask us why we did not embody all these things in our platform, which we believe, we reply to them that when we have restored the money of the Constitution, all other necessary reforms will be possible, and that until that is done, there is no reform that can be accomplished. So basically, he's saying, oh, look, if banks issue money, that's not right. People shouldn't have the right to use as money whatever they want to use. Only the government should be able to tell you what you can use as money. I once debated Milton Friedman going down a barge on the Danube River, in which my position was a bank ought to be able to print its own money and back it with whatever he wants to back it with. Gold, silver, titanium, Bitcoin, pelts, I don't care what, because people ought to have the right to deal in the money they think best and most likely to secure and store its own value. They ask us why we did not embody these things in our platform, which we believe. We reply to them that when we have restored money, the Constitution, all other necessary reforms will be possible, and until that is done, no reform can be accomplished. Why is it that within 3 months such a change has come over the sentiments of the country? 3 months ago, when it was confidently asserted that those who believe in the gold standard would frame our platform and nominate our candidates, even the advocates of the gold standard did not think that we could elect a president. But they had good reasons for the suspicion, because there's scarcely a state today asking for the gold standard that is not within absolute control of the Republican Party. I think we can finish this. But note the change. Mr. McKinley was nominated at St. Louis upon a platform that declared for the maintenance of the gold standard until he should be changed into bimetallism by an international agreement. Mr. McKinley was the most popular among the Republicans, and everybody 3 months ago in the Republican Party prophesied his election. How is it today? Why, that man who used to boast that he looked like Napoleon, that man shudders today when he thinks that he was nominated on the anniversary of the Battle of Waterloo. I doubt McKinley even thought of that one time. Not only that, but as he listens, he can hear with ever-increasing distinctiveness the sound of waves they beat upon the lonely shores of St. Helena. Gee whiz. Why this change? Ah, my friends, it is not the change evident to anyone who will look at the matter. It is because no private character, however pure, no personal popularity, however great, can protect from the avenging wrath of an indignant people the man who will either declare that he is in favor of fastening the gold standard upon the people, or who is willing to surrender the right of self-government and place legislative control in the hands of foreign potentates and power. So Bryan is saying McKinley's a terrible guy because he wants to have a gold standard in which the dollar is as good as gold, which you could convert $16 into 16 silver dollars or $16 into one gold dollar. McKinley's for that. Bryan's against it. We go forth confident that we shall win. Why? Because upon the paramount issue in this campaign, there is not a spot of ground upon which the enemy will dare challenge battle. Why, if they tell us the gold standard is a good thing and we point to their platform and tell them their platform pledged the party to get rid of a gold standard and substitute bimetallism, if the gold standard is a good thing, why try to get rid of it? If the gold standard, and I might call your attention to the fact some of the very party who are in this convention today who tell you what we ought to declare in favor of international bimetallism, and thereby declare that the gold standard is wrong and that the principles of bimetallism are better, these very people 4 months ago were open and avowed advocates of the gold standard and telling us that we would not legislate two metals together, even with all the world. I want to suggest this truth, that if the gold standard is a good thing, we ought to declare in favor of its retention, not in favor of abandoning it. If the gold standard is a bad thing, we should wait until some other nations are willing to help us let it go. Here's the line of battle. We care not upon which issue they force the fight. We are prepared to meet them on either issue or both. They tell us that the gold standard is standard of civilization. We reply to them this: the most enlightened of all nations of the earth has never declared for a gold standard, and both the parties this year are declaring against it. Well, that's simply not wrong. The U.S. did declare a gold standard early on. If the gold standard is the standard of civilization, why, my friends, should we not have it? So if they come to meet us on that, we can present the history of our nation. More than that, we can tell them this: if they will search the pages of history in vain to find a single instance in which the common people of any land ever declared themselves in favor of a gold standard, they can find where the holders of fixed investments have. England pretty much had a gold standard. They may not have declared it, but they had a gold standard. Mr. Carlyle, John G. Carlyle, Secretary of the Treasury, said in 1878 that this was a struggle between idle holders of idle capital and the struggling masses who produce the wealth and pay for the taxes of the country. And my friends, it is simply a question that we ought to decide upon which side shall the Democratic Party fight, upon the side of the idle holders of idle capital or upon the side of struggling masses. That is a question that the party must answer first, and then it must be answered by each individual hereafter. The sympathies of the Democratic Party, as described by the platform, are on the side of the struggling masses who have ever been the foundation of the Democratic Party. Folks, you have to have both. All the struggling masses in the world that worked at Andrew Carnegie's steel factory were not as valuable as Andrew Carnegie himself. Hate to break it to you. None of them invented the steel processes or came up with a way to make steel effectively and cheaply the way he did. None of John D. Rockefeller's employees came up with a way to basically put whaling out of business and to create kerosene that was so good and so cheap that the common man had it for almost pennies on the gallon. That is a question the party must answer first, and then it must be answered by each individual hereafter. The sympathies of the Democratic Party are described by the platform are on the side of struggling masses who have ever been on the foundation of the Democratic Party. There are two ideas of government. There are those who believe that if you just legislate to make the well-to-do prosperous, that their prosperity will leak on through to those below. That is not the principle of rising tide or trickle-down economics. The concept of rising tide is that as you lift the economy, all boats rise simultaneously, big and small. And by the way, you must have the wealthy. You simply must. Otherwise, there is no money to invest in new factories that will employ the not so wealthy. You come to us and tell us the great cities are in favor of the gold standard, but I tell you that the great cities rest upon the broad and fertile prairies. Wait a minute, I thought the American people were against the gold standard. Well, the cities contain most of the population, so I guess they're in favor of it. Burn down your cities and leave our farms, and your cities will spring up again as if by magic, but destroy our farms, and the grass will grow in the streets of every city in the country. That's true. We need both. My friends, we shall declare that this nation is able to legislate for its own people on every question without waiting for the aid or consent of any other nation on earth. Well, we already did that. We had a gold standard. And upon that issue, we expect to carry every single state in the Union. Well, you lost. I shall not slander the fair state of Massachusetts nor the state of New York by saying that when citizens are confronted by this proposition, is this nation able to attend to its own business, unquote, I will not slander either one by saying the people of those states will declare our helpless impotency as a nation to attend to our own business. It is the issue of 1776 all over again. Our ancestors, when but 3 million had the courage to declare their political independence of every other nation upon earth, shall we, their descendants, when we've grown to 70 million, declare that we are less independent than our forefathers? No, my friends, it will never be the judgment of this people. Therefore, we care not what lines the battle is fought. If we say bimetallism is good, but we cannot have it till some nation helps us, we reply that instead of having a gold standard because England has, we just said they didn't have one. Instead of having gold standard because England has, we shall restore bimetallism, and let England have bimetallism because the United States have. If they dare come out in this open field, defend the gold standard, saying it's a good thing, we shall fight them to the uttermost, having behind us the producing masses of this nation and the world, having behind us the commercial interests and the laboring interests and all the toiling masses. We shall answer their demands for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. So that's his cross of gold speech. I didn't think we'd get through all of it, but we did. Obviously, he wants inflation. He wants to be able to reduce the value of money so as to spread more money around in the name of justice. And that's why he lost the election of 1896 handily. And we'll get into that when we get back to the text. All right, I will see you guys next time.